and welcome to Living One. My name is Olivia Crossman. I'm your host. Living One is a monthly webinar series in which presenters from around the world share their vision for a future where all Earth beings live as one community in peace, dignity, and freedom. We ask the question, we know what's wrong, but what does right look like? This last fall marked the beginning of Living One's 4th year, but today these conversations are more important than ever, for they are more than conversations. They are opportunities to build community, salve for the isolating wounds of our time. Today, we have the 4th session of our spring series, Earth Restoration and the Evolution of Human Consciousness. This series will explore the widespread calls to restore nature, who has suffered so egregiously over the past 500 years from colonizing, human appropriation, destruction, and overpopulation. In light of recognition by many indigenous humans and Western science of animal and earth sentience, nature's restoration takes on a broader and deeper meaning. Over the next 3 weeks, we will hear the perspectives of 4 individuals who have dedicated their lives to earth restoration and expanding human consciousness. We are delighted to have you join us as we explore this important topic together. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various different indigenous lands. I am currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Carrillo Center for Nonviolence, located in Southern Oregon, is also the homelands of the grizzly bear, takelma, dakubedite, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. To recognize the land is to recognize the lasting effects of colonization, genocide, and oppression that still impact indigenous communities today. But it is also an expression of gratitude and appreciation for the land and for all those whose homelands we live and work on. In the 4th of this 6-part series, we welcome Dr. Alice Benessia. With a background in physics, epistemology, and visual art, Alice is the founder and director of the Pianpicollo Selvatico Foundation, a rural research center working at the boundary between art, deep ecology, and interspecies coexistence. She shares her home and research with the land of Pianpicollo, inhabited by a vast community of living and non-living beings. In her work, she uses photography, writing, and dialogue as ways to nurture and share presence as a state of being. Since 2017, she has curated the annual program Pianpicollo Research Residency, where artists and other researchers work together at the root of their research, collaborating with the human and non-human community of Pianpicollo. Since 2020, she has coordinated the partnership of Pianpicollo with the Italian National Research Council within the project Bridges, a collective reflection on the ethics of research through shared practices of encounter with soil. Before we begin, let me share a few logistical notes. Alice will be speaking for 45 minutes, after which we will have about 15 minutes for question and answer. In order to proceed in a timely manner, we ask that you please send your questions along in the chat during Alice's presentation, and we will read them out after she is finished. For anyone who isn't familiar with the Zoom chat function, if you move your cursor towards the bottom of your screen, you will see a number of icons appear, one of which is the chat function towards the center left of your screen. If you click on that, the chat will appear where you can type any questions or comments as we go. We have 2 members of our Carrillo's community here with us today, Jenny and Diksha, who will be monitoring the chat throughout our time together. Also, please note that this Zoom session will be recorded, so if you would feel more comfortable leaving your camera off or changing your Zoom name, please feel free to do so. Finally, we ask that unless you are currently speaking, you do keep your microphone muted to avoid any unintended interruptions. So without further ado, we welcome Dr. Alice Benessia.
Okay, thank you, Olivia. Hello, everybody from different parts of the world. It's 7:10 at night here in Pianpicollo, and so almost dinner time for a lot of creatures here. And I also would like to start by saying that today we have new creatures being born a few hours ago, new baby chicks that I just saw. So that's a nice coincidence. So maybe shall I say a little bit about my background before getting into the... Olivia, would you like me to do that, or?
Yes, absolutely. If you want to start, maybe tell us a little bit about your arc and how you got where you are today.
Yeah. So, well, as Olivia mentioned, I have this mixed background in science and art. and philosophy, kind of a very mixed hybrid background. So the stories that I began with theoretical physics many, many years ago, studying cosmology, astrophysics, particle physics. I was very much interested in these boundaries with the unknown and mysteries. So the very big, so cosmology, astrophysics, the very small, particle physics, and then another boundary that I ended up getting involved with later on was the boundary, the very many. So what the mystery of what happens when systems are made of many different elements. And the most mysterious of all are living beings, which are made of atoms that then become cells and then becomes, the unique thing that we all are in a specific form. So what I did as a theoretical physicist, I started to study something, statistical mechanics and thermodynamics, which is the science the physical science that studies systems with many elements. And I ended up studying protein folding, the scientific phenomenon, how proteins take a shape in space and then a function based on a one-dimensional sequence of amino acids. Today is a very, very important issue because that's how we make new beings, and that's very controversial. I won't get into that. But at the time, I studied that, and I was supposed to start a PhD in a center in Italy, a European center in Trieste, in Italy, on that topic. And I got very frustrated with how little I was allowed to ask about living beings, even though I was talking about proteins and then cells and then everything else. And so I was frustrated with what is called reductionism of science, how you break apart things and you're not allowed to see the connections. So frustrated that I took a summer. I had a month off during the summer, and I met a friend. I took a summer off and I went to New York and to do photography. I did a summer class. I had a chance to do that, and that changed my life essentially, because I fell in love with New York. I fell in love with photography. And I didn't want to go back and do protein folding and be involved in that physics in that way. And that was very difficult at the time. Friends and family, of course, said I was crazy, that I couldn't give up. I won't get into the whole drama of the whole thing, but I ended up having a chance to be in New York I applied for an MFA, Master of Fine Art, in an art school. And essentially I got my ticket to New York by applying to another program in the Foundations of Physics at Columbia University, thinking that I was probably going to get in there, but not in the art school. I ended up getting in both programs, and I decided to do both at the same time. And that's how my life started to be about art and science and philosophy. And I started to practice art and photography as a way of encountering others. So I went back for today actually to my background, and I'm thankful for this invitation, because I realized that a lot of things that are happening now in Pianpicollo with these creatures that I will tell you about in a few minutes, started out with this approach to art making and photography that I was practicing back then in the art school, where I met a wonderful teacher and now friend, a wonderful photographer called Philip Perkins, and I shared with him this idea that you can use photography as a way to witness an encounter between your inner world and the outer world, and find out if you can look at the world in a non-hierarchical way. So using photography not as a predatory tool and not as a ideally neutral tool, but as a collaboration between in and out. That happened. Then I came back to Italy, decided that I was going to be an artist. And I met another very important person that I'm happy to mention today, because it's a common friend with Gay Bradshaw. And it's the reason why I'm here also. His name is Silvio Funtovic. I was ready to give up again science and philosophy, and I met him. Silvio is an Argentinian philosopher, a wonderful human being. And I fell in love with this way of looking at science, something called post-normal science. I'm not going to get into that. But again, it's a relational practice. So I thought I could work with him, and I went back once again into this theoretical work. And I ended up doing a PhD with Silvio on something that has to do with at the boundary interface between philosophy of law and philosophy of science. All this is to say that when I met with this land, and we're getting to the main topic of today, I came in with all this background, and I also came in, I'd like to mention a third very important element. I came here, I met this land with a disease. In 2009, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune degenerative disease that is officially untreatable. It's an inflammatory bowel disease. And probably was my emotional body was not agreeing with my mental body and my physical body. So in the conflict, that disease kind of appeared. In 2011, and here we're getting finally to, actually, maybe I'll start sharing my screen. So we get to some images. It's going to be a visual journey a little bit. So here we are. Yeah. So in 2011, I was lucky enough to have some money to invest. It was some family money. And I was looking, I had this call that I wanted to find a land where I could integrate these two lives that I was dealing with, the academic scholar work and the artistic self, and my artist self. And so I was looking for a land, and I asked a friend to see if he could help me, if he found something interesting. He came up with this ad online about this land, and the ad was Pianpicollo, and I went to visit, and this was the only one that I saw, the first and only. So the land literally called me, and I responded. And I've been in a conversation with this land since then, since 2011. 2012, it took me a few months to decide. So the conversation is an ongoing conversation, and the land is, like Olivia mentioned, is home to a community. It's a beautiful place, and it's a home to a community of living and non-living beings. And I'm using this term conversation, going back to the etymology, kind of the root of the word convertere, from Latin, and vertere has to do with turning around with. So it has to do with spending time together, sharing experiences together, sharing adventures together. And we know that that's the best way to get to know someone. And also it's the best way to get along, because by sharing something other than ourselves with someone or a community, we don't look at our own inner drama, and in that we have a chance to get somewhere interesting. And this is also, in Italian wisdom is how good marriages work. So we can say also that I'm married to this land and it's working really well. So this is how I found the place where when I visited. This is a building that had to be renovated, mostly was inhabited. There was a little piece that was that could be lived in, and a family was living there. And then you could see that there's a beautiful flat land in the background, in the valley. It's very isolated. And the name Pianpicollo means piccolo piano, little plain. So the etymology, the origin of the word has to do with this anomaly, because the region is there's a lot of hills and they're all steep, and there's a lot of terraces. And so this land is kind of unique. And I found, let me see if I can, oh no, I need to navigate through here, sorry. This is how I found it, and this is how we started to make changes. This is how it looks today. You see that there's another construction that is for animals, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. This is just to give you a sense of the place. You see that all around is high hills. This is another view. Another specific thing about Pianpicollo is the orientation. The normal orientation of the farms is southwest, and Pianpicollo is northeast, so it's the opposite of that. You see that the main wall here is in a shadow. And this is more, what I learned later it's the orientation of monasteries. So I found that interesting. This is a very old map that I found, It's a 16th century map, and you can see that the place name is already here, Pianpicollo. So the name came before, the name of the land came before the house. And here you see this flat land, essentially, that characterizes the place. And then selvatico, which is the other term, in Italian means wild, and it means wild meaning into the woods, selva. And as you see, the flatland is surrounded by woods. And this other name that came after, first it was Pianpicollo and then it was Selvatico, was also very creative for me. It triggered the whole reflection about this boundary between what we consider as domesticated and what we consider as wild. And this land is really a beautiful place to experience an in-between, which is the thing that I'm doing with the animals that I will talk a little bit about. So this is yet another view, different seasons. And I slowly moved in. I moved in 2012. I did some workshops. This is a theater play. This is the courtyard. The inner courtyard has it look like at the beginning. So you see a big barn here. And then the only place that was livable was this area here. And I lived there for a year doing some activities. And then we started the big renovation process. That was also painful to see this transformation happening. So this is a little bit of it was a big work. And now it's a little bit how it looks today. Today there's a lot of plants here, but I didn't have the time to take another picture, but you can see it in the website. During the renovation, I applied for some grants for European money, and I got some extra money partially to renovate the buildings, but also to work on the land. So a beautiful thing that we could do with this money was to create this humid area, a little pond that was made by collecting all the rainwater from the valley, most of the rainwater from the valley, and then our own water that was purified by a plant system base. And so we have all this ecosystem that has been created with this grant. It worked out really well. This is how it looks a little bit today. So even with the big drought that we had, this part is still flourishing. And we have all these creatures emerging. This was in front of my kitchen a few days ago, so that was nice. Salamanders. Now, because we got these grants and I decided to use the money that I spared to do something a little bit crazy, to have this group of scientists and artists join me in a research project during the renovation, during the transformation of this place. I had this group of people working on the land and working on this idea of transformation. So as humans, we transform our environment, and this boundary between what is destructive transformation and what is a creative transformation or regenerative transformation, which is a big question, of course, for us all. And so with this group of people, we met regularly, and we camped. And it was also a way to accompany, to be with the land in this conversation with the land, as the land was kind of challenged by this major work. It was also a little, like I said, painful to see. So we did some photography workshops during the renovation. We had a forest garden, the making of an ecosystem, a stable, edible ecosystem with this botanist and chemist friend. We had a theater piece that was performed, and we had people coming during the renovation. We had it started in 2014, ended 2 years later. In between, we had an open day where we had a kind of a celebration of the in-progress of the whole thing, where artists would show their in-progress work, and at the same time, people could visit the construction. This was a polyphonic singing in nature. This was a recording of the soundscape of Pianpicollo. And all these people that came to work we had in common this approach to art making and being in the land that was based on listening, on being in a dialogue, and engaging in a conversation with this place. So it was in different ways. These artists, they built a system of platforms that kind of regenerated a place, a piece of the land that was abandoned. And they work with students also. We had a workshop with them, and they used all the materials that were coming out of the renovation and couldn't be used in the same place. So it was recycling, essentially. And they made this beautiful permanent installation that now it's called Vital Badek. The artists are called Andrea Carretto and Raffaella Spagna. And they made this, they also work with these stones, and I take a little time to show you these, because these stones, they are part of the land. We mentioned living and non-living beings. The stones are non-living beings that are very present, and they have a lot to say. And what happens in this conversation is that sometimes I have questions, or I have moments where you have a thought or a feeling, and then you meet a stone. I walk out and I meet a stone. These stones, they have incredible shapes. They look like sculptures. They emerge from the soil. They're used to build. So I'm surrounded. You see those stones in the background. So the stones are everywhere. They're in the house, in the soil. There are all these walls in the path, in the roads. So part of the conversation that I have with this land is through these stones. And these artists really found they had the same feeling, and they made this beautiful garden of stones. So, before let's leave this creature here. So as the renovation finished, two things happened. One, with this group of people that have been collaborating, we founded what was then a cultural association, so a research center. So the transformation project became the foundation of what Pianpicollo is today. These people that I shared these experiences with became the founders of Pianpicollo, and essentially they're all artists. As soon as I started to live in the house after it was renovated, I started to have this encountering these creatures, these animals, through different stories, through different, they came all as gifts. I guess the land started to attract these animals. They were all animals in need. Some of them were just born. Some of them came as old. I will show you them all at the end. So first I talk a little bit about them, and then and meanwhile you can figure out what creature that is, which is not that obvious, I think. So these creatures that they came were all domestic. They're all domesticated animals, and they're born and made and selected to be functional to humans. So essentially, they're pigs, and this is one of them. Pigs, horses, donkeys, and chickens. They are selected, and they are in their behavior and in their genetic expression to be functional to humans. What happened here is that they don't have a function anymore, and because the land is so generous, as you see, we are all allowed to be free in the sense of having a big space to move around, all of us. And so what happened is that I started to share my life with them. And this happened between 2018 and 2019. They kind of came in all at once. And it was kind of interesting that I didn't put an ad. I didn't look for them. They came through encounters with people asking me. One of them, the pigs, for example, they came because a guy, literally a neighbor, drove down the road, opened the trunk. There was these two little creatures, miniature babies. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to throw them out if you don't take them in." And so I said, "Okay, I guess I'll take them in." So that's how they came. And horses came from different stories, again, through people that came here. They told me about them. And it looked like something that I had to do. It looked like the land was kind of ready to have them here. So with them, I'm conducting an experiment, in a sense, an experiment of mutual care. and transformation. By taking care of them, as much as they need, and I also find out a lot about my animal being, about what it is to be alive in a form, which I'm sure Gay, who has many animals and takes care of animals, relate to this. So what happens is that we improvise, we meet during the day. Each one of us is engaging in its own process in its own day, and we meet at different times. And sometimes they need protection, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I need protection, and it's a beautiful improvisational process. And I was thinking, as I was thinking about my background, and I go back to that, it's very similar to what I learned as a photographer, as an artist, to put yourself, to give yourself time to observe and be with these other creatures, and let room for inner and outer to meet. So let me show you let me show you them. These are the two donkeys, mother and daughter. The mother was abused. They're all doing very well now. The daughter was very young when she came here. Horses. This is the main creature in the black horse is a beautiful creature that was, her owner couldn't keep her anymore, and she's old. She's 24 now. And she has a genetic disease, so it's she has special needs, so it's very challenging, but also beautiful experience to have her with us. Some creatures came from the wild, from the land, and this was a little deer that I had a chance to spend a few months with. He recovered and went back to the land, and so we share some moments. This is a workshop, singing, polyphonic singing, and we were sharing the moment. And here you meet the pigs as they came. There's two other horses. One is a race horse that was also abused and couldn't compete anymore, and came with a high. It was highly traumatized and is doing much better now. And the white guy is the older. He's now 30, and he used to work with kids. So he was working all his life in an environment with sand. So he was breathing a lot of sand. He has issues with his lungs. So all of them has. And these are the glorious chickens. We don't have Archimede, the rooster passed away a few weeks ago, and he saved. He passed away. He was predated by a bird, and he saved the hens by the attack, and that's how he sacrificed himself. Pigs, taking the space of the dog. I also have a very old dog that I don't mention because it's part of almost like a private family, very special member of the group. So here you get to see the land. We essentially explore also the land together. This is a resting. These are the shelters that they have. This is the barn. So being with them in this land is also, I hope it has to do also with being able to be quiet and listen to them as life in a form and to these other beings. And so this silence also has to do, and I found out as I'm doing it, that it has to do also with a silence of intention. So you put yourself out there with them, you improvise with them, and there's no goal, there's no aim. It's just being together in this place. And by doing that, you end up learning a lot about yourself and about the place. And it's also acknowledging complexity, constant complexity day by day, and learning how to respond to this complexity. So it's a training on how to be present and how to be resilient, in a sense, how to learn how to respond. And the root of responsibility, which I found a few months ago, responsibility in its original sense has to do with ability to respond. So how can you be responsive? You can be responsible towards a creature or a place by learning how to respond, being present and learn how to respond to that place. Now, there's another issue that came up in being with them that I kept wondering for a while, how far can they go? Because their genetics is highly domesticated. They're fragile in a sense. The pigs, they're programmed to get very fat. I almost don't feed them, but they get very fat, and what people told me is that, of course, you don't eat them. They essentially, their legs collapse at some point. And my pigs are doing very well. They move all the time. So this has not happened yet. I hope it doesn't happen soon. But anyway, and the horses is the same. They're all creatures that have been designed to be functional to humans and functional also in their life to humans. So what happens when they have a chance to express themselves? How far can they go, in a sense, to a wild? That was my initial question. How far can they go into this wild state, thinking that was kind of there was something, essential about that? Then I realized that the question was not very well posed, that it doesn't make any sense in a way to have them to think about it in that way. And also I realized that I was in the same position, that my animal being also has been programmed in generations and generations, first of all, to be very urban. I was living in city environments all my life before coming here, but also in generations and generations of Western culture. So how much and how far can one go in disengaging with this? And then there was, at some point, I remember one day a chicken died, and there was this big silence. Isidora, a beautiful chicken that I loved. And as I was witnessing the death with the rooster that was also quiet with me, I had a sense of, well, at the end of the day, it's about fullness of being, that you can be a fullness of animal being, pig being, chicken being, human being. And so it's learning together how to move towards that fullness of being. And then I had this memory, I'm telling you this, and I wrote this in a little text that I'll tell you more about later, which is a diary of Pianpicollo. After that, I had a memory of a quote of a writing of a South African writer, coexistence, who wrote a lot about animals and the lives of animals. And he had this alter ego, Elizabeth Costello. At some point, she said about animals and about these issues, she said something really beautiful. She said, for me, one name for the experience of full being is joy. And so I realized that this life with these creatures is just really joyful. There's a lot of joy in it. And that's the whole point, maybe. And going back to my background and the ark, this land and these animals, this community, this multi-species consciousness ended up healing me completely. So I haven't been taking any medication. My disease is in complete remission, and it has been in complete remission for many years now, for 4 years now. So in a sense, it's I have a very evidence of a very real transformational process towards a healing, towards regeneration. The chickens come from a program, they're leftovers of a breeding program from the University of Torino. This friend of mine is trying to breed some old ancient breeds of chickens that are more robust. They can live outside, they're more compared to the industrial farming. And he's doing that by crossbreeding all these chickens, and he has leftovers. So the ones that are not supposed to move on, and that's what I do. I take them and they live in Pianpicollo. So as you can see, the land is very generous and beautiful. And then you start to see them, chickens are birds, but you kind of forget And by looking at them and how they behave and what they you realize that, of course, they're birds and they're highly intelligent, they're highly emotional, they have a full life. Like when Archimedes died, I thought the rooster died. I really had a sense, oh, he had a full life. He really. This is a recent picture of this. This is Maconda, a girl brooding. I don't know if you say brooding the eggs. So I couldn't find her, and then I found her in the barn, and today it's her babies are born. This is the little deer that I spent a few months with. Glorious pig. Pigs are extremely intelligent and funny. And well, this image, I put it in because I remember when the deer was with us that the cat really enjoyed being with him, and that made me realize that animals being with them also, they have a kind of a frequency, they move in a certain way, they behave in a certain way, they have a quality of being, which I associate to the term frequency, which has to do with the way they move. So cats and pigs, they don't really get along at all. They don't match. They don't, because pigs are, they move differently. They have different issues. And I found very interesting that the cat and the deer really got along. And it has to do with the way as I perceived, it has to do with the way they are. They vibrate, they move, they behave. A similar encounter with plants occurred over the years. So plants and other creatures, the wild community of the land. Here we did some environmental assessment. Pianpicollo is now, and I did that because I would like Pianpicollo to become Sito di interesse comunitaria, which is a protected area of interest in the European law. And so this was to find out all the butterflies that live in Pianpicollo and learn how biodiversity of plants, and if you let them be, essentially, they flourish. Orchids, we also found a lot of orchids that are protected in this directive, European Community Directive. So we're in the process of doing that, appreciating them, wild orchids. And also I realized how my eyes started to see that at the beginning I couldn't see a lot of these creatures. And slowly I started to really see, and also see how they are born and they come and they go. So this time becomes cyclic. It's very evident, some flowers bloom at a certain time, then they go, and then some others, which seems kind of obvious, but when you perceive it in yourself, you start to perceive yourself also as a cycle, as a being that it comes and goes. This is it's a garden, it's a vegetable garden. So it's how you start gardening in collaboration with beings, with plants, and how you learn to do that on a small scale, on a bigger scale. This is an example of forest garden. As the community of Pianpicollo, with me living there and all these animals, permanently moving there, and all these animals and all these plants, we started to have artists and other researchers to spend their time. So the idea is that, because I realized that I was given one of the many gifts of this place, of this land, was time, to have the time to be here and really go to the root of my own research and practice. So with the other founders, we applied for a grant for residency, long-term residency. We wrote this project that had to do with a long-term residency, meaning a year. So one person could come and go for a year, so 4 seasons in Pianpicollo, and have a chance to go to the roots of the research. This is the first artist. Meanwhile, working with the community, so this is the kids of the school, kindergarten school. This is the first artist. And working at the boundary, again, between domesticated and wild in different ways. Maurizio Chili, the first artist, worked with stones also. He met with this beautiful big stone in a nearby farm, and the neighbor decided to give it to Pianpicollo. And he made this beautiful sculpture that is now sits in the land, as you see it. It's now in the grass in this picture. And it's a meeting point for everybody, for the community, for birds, for animals. This is another workshop we did with the kids of the school. Another artist, this is a sound artist. I'll go fast, just to give you a sense of all the things that keep happening in this conversation with this land. This is the platform that was built by these other artists and is now used to give workshops. This is with students of the architecture. Kids. This was working with sound made by nature, so it's wind and learning how to listen to wind through this different vibration of these different stripes of glass. This is another artist when she's working with the tail of the black horse. So the black thread is actually comes from the horse. And she made these metamorphic sculptures that are sitting in the land. So the land is also becoming richer and richer in the sense of these gifts that are left by these artists. These gifts are also at the foundation of this, what happened next. We are now a foundation. Pianpicollo Selvatico is now a foundation. To be a foundation, you have to have money kind of set apart in Italy, I think also in the States, I assume. So what happened here is that the money is not money, but it's the value of these art pieces that were given as gift by these artists. So the Pianpicollo Foundation literally is based on this artwork, which I find very touching, the generosity also of these people. Okay, so COVID came in 2020, and as COVID came, I right before then in 2019, I made a move to leave everything, let go of everything in the sense of living permanently here, and meaning not moving, kind of an extreme choice. I even before COVID, I decided I was living with these creatures, with them all the time, so I didn't move. And then COVID came and I was by myself a lot with these others. And this was a very precious time. And I took a lot of pictures. So now I'm just going to show you a few images that came. Some of them are a little bit earlier, but they go along with the others. So you see what the conversation of this land is about in terms of photography, of my photography. Let me go back. So as the winter, as COVID, winter and spring, and then summer 2021 finished, I was also working on another grant, and this we go from art to science, working on another project that was already funded that had to do with science. In 2019, with a colleague and very good friend from Milan, we started this project that was mentioned by Olivia at the beginning, called Bridges, that is done in collaboration with this friend who works at the National Research Council of Italy. The project has to do is an attempt to engage with researchers that already work in institutions, in academia, in this research, National Research Council, and work with them towards a sense of maybe making changes or thinking about the value, the meaning and the value of their research. And of course, with COVID, everything became more extreme. It became more urgent also to think about the role of science and with everything else that is going on in the world. So we started to think about a way to have them engage with this different way of making science. And that's how I started to think about relational science. And essentially all the stuff that I said about my approach to art making and being with these creatures, what happens if we start thinking about science in a similar way? So basically, and this is just a few notes that we shared with these people in a workshop that I will tell you about. So going from measuring the world to encountering the world, we decided to use a case study and have this group of researchers come to Pianpicollo and then work also in the city of Milan with citizens on encountering soil and the living part, the living community, living into the soil, living and non-living, but mostly living. And have them with us and with citizens work on creating these indicators that are relational. We have indicators of soil, the traditional ways, scientific ways, physical, chemical, so nitrogen, potassium, pH, and all these measurements into the soil. And about the living parts of the soil, we know very little. We're learning, but we know very little. And the approach is the approach of conventional science, is to study these living creatures as objects of study. So measure them. So what happens instead of thinking about measuring, in this case, this community, we think about encountering them, an encounter between subjects. What happens if the researcher is not a neutral observer that doesn't exist, some kind of deus ex machina, some view from nowhere, but is actually a person and with an emotional, a physical body and a history? And what happens if the creatures that is encountering is not measuring, but encountering as subjects? So there's a move between looking for a truth to going into a quality of process. And that has to do with trust. And while sharing all this, I found out that the etymology of truth and trust is actually the same. So one question that we can ask about science, conventional science, is what kind of truth we think we can uncover or discover or encounter if it's a truth that implies a breaking of trust. If you think about the other as an object, the truth that you find out in a lab, in an experiment, is based on breaking the trust with this other, because you end up, if it's a living thing, you end up killing the thing. What happens if we think about truth in a different way? What happens if we give up the objectivity of science? And that's a very open question. What happens? So first thing that happens is that it's very difficult to imagine that the truth you find by encountering others is universal and exhaustive. It cannot be universal, and it's dangerous if you think that it cannot be universal. These are all, I'm just opening up all these questions to say what we're talking about with these researchers. What happens if instead of predicting the future and looking for causality, you focus on correspondence between inner and outer world? What happens if instead of analysis and breaking down, you start to work with analogy and intuition? All these things come from my practice, and not only many other people's practice in art making and with this creature. What happens is instead of predicting, you learn to respond. As I was thinking about all these and looking at all this and talking about it with these colleagues, I started to look at other people that were already practicing science or were already practicing relational research. And I went back to a book, and the book title is Talking with Bears, and the author is Gay Bradshaw. So that's how, by thinking about all this, I ended up reading again that book that I met years ago, many years ago, and finding out about Charlie Russell was this. I mean, I'm talking about him with Gay here, so I'm a little embarrassed about a beautiful, wonderful human being who spent his life with bears, paying attention, spending time with them, trying to understand them, not knowing them, but understanding it by being with them. And then I found this other work that I ended up also appreciating by this other researcher, scientist, Italian originally, but working in Australia, Monica Gagliano, working with plants in the same way. So we brought all this in a wonderful workshop we did in the summer of 2022. Finally, COVID was giving us a rest. We had this group of young researchers coming to Pianpicollo and digging in the soil, encountering all this abstraction that I said until now became very real. These people were digging with this, guided by these artists, and they were digging gently. So how can you dig without destroying what the living creatures that you meet? How can you dig as a worm? How can you dig as a root? And how can you observe, really observe in a non-hierarchical way what you're encountering? So they had to make these layers, and then the whole had to be, everything had to be put in place according to the original layers, and they had to observe and catalog and be with these creatures. They were also engaging with the soil, the topsoil, so plants, gathering herbs. So engaging with this very ancestral gesture which humans have been doing forever, which is gathering. We also had some edible herbs. Also learning again how to observe in a non-hierarchical way, really look at these beings above the soil and under the soil. Engaging again, a way to really carefully look at something is drawing and translating what you observe into the experience of motion. So we had this all this work that was done, and these are all scientists, and they're all scientists in their 30s and 40s, already academics, and from different disciplines. So they were here for 5 days, and it was a completely transformative experience. There were soil scientists, but also philosophers, biologists, physicists, all kinds of different disciplines. And they ended up not only appreciating each other, but after this, they ended up renting a van and spending time together to write a paper about what happened. So this was an example of transdisciplinary research. I put this here. This is a very beautiful Leonardo da Vinci's drawing that I remember seeing in the reality at the Metropolitan Museum many years ago, and it's an example, a wonderful, beautiful example of how you can really get to know these others by carefully looking and engaging in a pure observation and drawing with this drawing motion of your hand. And this is actually Leonardo studying a reflection of the light on the leaves of a tree. I'm finishing up. I've been talking a lot with this last chapter, which has to do with, I'm really happy to talk about this. While all this was happening during all these reflections on science and art and relational research, I got this invitation from this art curator that now directs this journal. This is a philosophy journal, academic journal, but it went into the hands of this art curator Gabi Scardi from Milan and this young philosopher Valentina Vanzini, also from Milan. And they invited me to curate this issue that has to do, it's a journal that has to do with animal studies, but in this case, they wanted to have a more open dialogue also with other beings, so plants, microorganisms, anything that I would think about. And so what I accepted the invitation as a way to engaging into other conversations with humans and non-humans, and that's how I got in touch again with Gay, and we had a beautiful conversation about Charlie Russell, but also about her own work, about Keroulos, and so we have this in the journal. This is the making of the journal, which, as you see, was not much of a mental activity. It was also conversation with images and with this land and animals of this land also. And these are some of the images that ended up in the journal. The issue has contributions of people working at both in science and art, that they relate to these others in this relational way. So there's Monica Gagliano, this biologist, talking about relationship with plants. There's an epidemiologist, veterinarian from Canada, talking about relationship with microorganisms. There's a beautiful contribution by two artists, Italian artists, founders of Pianpicollo, about a dialogue with the river. So what they did is they asked the Yamuna River, which is a sacred Indian river, questions collectively, and then they had this ink. They dropped this ink into the water, and then paper was put into the water, and it's a kind of a hydromancy. So the drawings that came out of the process were the answers to these questions, and so the drawings are also in the journal. And then we have another artistic contribution by this New York-based artist, Cirilo Mozenter, who maybe is here today. Beautiful work about failure as an intrinsic component of all these endeavors of human condition, and what do you do with failure, and how do you deal with failure? These are some of the images these are night images of plants and animals. These are made with the automatic cameras that I set up in the land. This idea that during the day we all go out, we domesticated creatures, we explore the land, and then at night we go to bed, and these other creatures come out, and we meet in my walks. Sometimes, you meet them at dawn and dusk, and you have these fleeting encounters. We have wolves. Forest asleep at night. The journal is all black and white, so black and white images were chosen. So this community is really there at all times for me. Sometimes when I sleep, I think about them, or I dream about them. Also, the conversation happens also in dreams. This is a drawing by an artist who participated with Chiara Sgaramella. She's an artist and a researcher. She participated to the journal with a wonderful conversation about how you relate to soil, going back to the project that I was talking about before, in a conversation with a farmer from Spain. And this is some of her artwork. And this is a drawing that happened, and I'll finish with this. This is a drawing that I made, and it was the experience of drawing was very special, and it happened during this workshop in the middle of the summer with these researchers. We had a badger that came out of the woods in the middle of the day. It was very hot. It was in the middle of the big drought, and he was essentially collapsing of a heat stroke. So what happened is that they called me, and I put a wet sheet on his body, and then we brought him here. And he managed to drink a lot of water. We saved him, and I was very struck by everybody actually was struck, and this is how also the land is communicating with people. You know, we were talking about climate change and all these issues, and then that happened and made the land kind of offered Pianpicollo, in a sense. If we think about genius logic, the spirit of the land, of the multi-species collective consciousness, in a sense, we had, mystery. We had that badger coming in, and it made it very real. So I was very struck by the meeting with this creature, and then I sat in this drawing workshop. And I don't draw; it's not my main. I never draw. But somehow, because I was very emotionally touched, my hand kind of was looking for the badger on the paper, and this is what happened, and I kept it in the journal. So thank you. I stopped sharing, and I shut up.
That was incredible, Alice. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. It's so wonderful to learn all about what you guys are up to over there, and the origin of your foundation, and you speak so beautifully to how your different interests and expertise over the years collaborates there with what you're working on right now and all the different beings that are a part of it. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat from Mike. He shares, do you think that if we would have balanced the reductionist with holism and the rational with the intuitive, we would be in a different place today, a different technological and scientific approach leading to a more life-supporting system than what we are experiencing today?
Wow, yes, I think so. Well, probably, most likely, but I think we're so moved, we're so much into this, collectively, we're so much engaging into this, you call reductionist approach, which means, thinking that you know everything by splitting everything apart and analyzing. And these other aspects that I tried to mention today are left in the fringe of people. There's a lot of people, and not only humans living like that, and also humans of different cultures living like that, but collectively as what we call, Western culture, we sort of forgot about it. And also we tend to be, another aspect that I didn't mention, but the question kind of triggered this, is that we need to be efficient and productive at all times. And another gift of this place and this setup is to have freedom and time to not be efficient and productive. And what happens if you're not? What kind of world would we be living in if we wouldn't be forced to be productive and efficient? What if we do something that is completely unproductive, completely inefficient, completely, So anyway, the short answer is yes, but not only that, I would probably balance by not half and half. I would probably try to move our collective way of living and being towards this kind of approach, relational, if we want to use one word to sum it up, relational approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike, for your question. Would anyone else like to ask anything or share a comment?
I would. Alice, you were talking about the whole thing was in conversation, and the inner and outer, and dissolving that or making that more porous. Describe the conversation that describe the conversation. I mean, you've shown implicitly conversation. Can you put into words your conversation with the badger? When I say your, meaning the mutual conversation in that way, or some of the individual humans who have been visiting. What is the nature of their conversation in terms of what
Thank you.
unfolds?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Not an easy question, but a beautiful question. So it's difficult to describe in words. I would describe it as an openness. It begins, if we're talking about conversation with humans, we use words and sounds, but not only that. But if we talk about like my conversation with the badger, my conversation with the land, it has to do with a sense of openness to what is there, openness to what is happening, being present to what is happening. And in that openness, there's a room, there's a space for this other to express as a form, as a being, as a, the badger. What, for example, speaking about the conversation with the badger, I was holding him in the sheet, and then I put him in a sink. There's a stone sink right outside, and I started to give him a little bit of water, and he came back to life, essentially. As soon as he came back to life, he was trying to bite me. Because of course he realized, what the hell am I doing here? What is this lady? What does she want from me? So I felt the fear. So the conversation was my range of action and feelings and really trying to respond to him, and him reacting and not reacting, responding to what was happening. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question. I'm just describing that there's an openness, and then you get these signs from this other if you let it express, and you can respond. And with an animal is more evident. With a plant or with a collective, with the land is not as the time also of a conversation is completely different. But I would describe, for example, a conversation with the land, I would describe it as these signs that show up constantly. That if I'm open enough, I see them happening, and I respond, or they happen in dreams, or they happen in, again, a fleeting moment, an animal or a bird or I don't know, or a cloud, or it could be anything really. But yeah, I don't know if I'm responding to the question or not.
No. So it seems in a way that the conversation could be like a figure eight, like the infinity, where there's a flow in that sense. And it's less this, that, and
and also so it's
and
moving
opening, but there is
opening. Sorry.
No.
I got excited. Yeah, it's an opening and it's a moving together. It's and I realize now that I didn't mention another really powerful root that I found out about. That is the root of the word art, which originally the very ancient root is from a Sanskrit word ar, which means moving towards and setting things in motion. So there's a first in this the conversing is moving towards also this other, and then setting things in motion together, so kind of progressing together. So I would describe it as that in a not with the intention of getting somewhere specific, but more sharing.
As Charlie talks about the to really love someone. Well, this is kind of like the figure eight too. To love someone, you need to understand them. To understand them, you need to love them. And so that concept of understanding it is non-directional. I mean, in the sense of, or is non-intentional. It's rather a tabula rasa. It's open to whatever is going to emerge.
Right.
Do you
Yeah.
see that this process that so far that the role and the significance of the human language as a spoken language as well as a written language is necessarily going to diminish?
Well, that's another really interesting point, because in my experience, especially with COVID, that I spent a lot of time in silence with these creatures and these beings. Then when humans came in, you know, with a Zoom or with a call or at some point in person, I realized how language was very, how difficult it was to keep that openness and that state of presence, because of course it's yours, it's you know, it's yourself, it's the same being, it's the same type of creature, and you use the same language. So language gets in the way in a sense. So I realized that after COVID, when I went back to engaging with humans, that I found it difficult. I found it, I was getting emotional. I was getting, it was just too much in a sense. So I would say, in a way, as great as it is, language is, human language is, it can also be gets in the way. What could be also what I found out also is that it's interesting. You start to use language, leaving it open, so open to the ambivalence, to the inherent ambiguity. So leave some room in between words or in between. So that helps to have a conversation that is more similar. And then with a lot of humans, you don't talk much. You don't talk much. You just walk together or do something together. What was powerful with these researchers here is that also we did a lot of work. We shared physical work, so we didn't have to talk. It was not about talking. It was about sharing this encountering, and it was, you know, very hot. They were working in the woods. There were mosquitoes. So sharing this, being there with this place, with this. And so they didn't talk much. At the beginning, they were talking a lot, and then finally it was very quiet, and they started to engage with each other in a different way.
So do you think that has, if you would talk about research, then that also will have an impact in terms of how quote unquote research is conducted and communicated?
Well, that's the hope, of course. You know, there are seeds. What I realized in this little experiment we did with this group is that, and here I go back to trust, is that we created a place where they felt some kind of collective trust. There was enough to let go of their identity as scholars, so to let go of the technicalities or the intellectual, also the defense that we all have as when you are embodying a certain identity. They let that go and they engage in a very direct. They trusted each other and they trusted the place. They trusted the setup. And I think that has resonated, and now they're still engaged in the process, in the project. So it did change a little bit, I think. Here is a cat participating to the conversation. So it did change in the sense that they started to collaborate with each other. They wanted to work together. And I think they also, for sure, they have a different sense of soil. Some of them, even soil scientists, they never made a hole. They said, "Oh, I never did that. I never done that. I usually do my measurement, in a standardized way." They've never done that. They never encountered. So I think that stays with them. Of course, tiny seeds. I don't know, but.
Let me ask you one more question. If you contrasted your during COVID isolation as such from other humans and then post, Can you think for a minute, did your sort of locus of identity shift from one to another? Did you find an identity or a space of being that was different in those two occasions?
Well, my life didn't change much because here I'm isolated anyway. But what happened, and what I mentioned a little bit, was this extra silence, because everything else. Because I also have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy. I mean, all this is, the foundation and all this, the research center involves a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of stuff that is not that great to deal with, and everything was shut down. So it was basically me and Pianpicollo. So it gave me, there was a great, there was joy, and there was an opening. There was a bigger opening. So when I came back, I had more tools, more experiences, more. So it did, in a good way. Yeah, I was lucky. I was very lucky. And also in the first lockdown, Italian lockdown, that was very strict. It was kind of the opposite. For 2 months, I had all my family here, my parents, everybody came here. So it was crowded. So all the Saturday, I was like, it was a very long Christmas dinner. So that also was part of the experience. Very, very positive, also challenging, as you can all imagine, but also very positive, and it has its beauties, and yeah. So,
one more question. Dina Metzger is a writer, and she has, she's an incredible author and a writer, and she's created this sort of concept and works with different writers and poets and things, and speaking about a literature of restoration. And without me, trying to paraphrase it in any kind of way, I think that it's the notion of, is there a way of working and communicating in language that is one of restoration, meaning restoration in the way you're discussing? So in the sense of poetry and extending it to art and things like that, are those examples of a restoration?
Well, I think language, for sure, language can be used in a way of, again, to open up or to create room for, in a relational sense, I would say. So yes. What I'm personally experimenting with language, and maybe it's actually relevant to the question, is how my own language has been changing. My writing has been changing, my speaking has been changing with all this, and it has been changing a lot in the sense that it's embedded in experience. And so it's way simpler in a sense. And what I'm experimenting now, I've been experimenting for a while now, is this diary, writing these notes at the end of the day. So experimenting with this, it's not a poetic language, it's more like making notes. It has, it's the diary, it's the anecdotes of Pianpicollo. So I think the language changes in the sense that, again, it's these defenses. As these defenses go down, you don't have to, refer or use fancy or technical or disciplinary language. You're more so. It's more close to reality.
So that would include art as well.
For sure, in a big way, for sure. Yes, I think it's very, yeah.
But in a sense, the reason I was asking about the significance of, I'll say, human expression, which would include art. Do you think that they are? You talked about the stone that was made, and it has become kind of a meeting place for not only the humans but non-humans. So that language and human expression, which is art and music and things like that, are exclusionary because they're human. But are you saying that they're developing a kind of porosity by living in this multi-species consciousness and openness and porosity?
Well, they can work as, well, art can be, in its best, triggers a shift in consciousness or aliveness. You know, there's this, again, going to aesthetic, the origin of aesthetic. There was this thing that I read years ago in a dialogue between two artists, Joseph Beuys and Volker Arlan. And they were saying that we should think about aesthetic in opposition of anesthetic or numbness. So art, making an art and all these languages as ways of reminding you that you're alive, there's a sense of aliveness and a shift of consciousness. So for sure, art is used in a certain way, can trigger, can be a powerful tool, a human tool, to trigger a shift in perception or a shift in consciousness. And maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking about this now as we speak, maybe if it comes up, I'm sure not only, but if it comes up from this porosity, maybe it can trigger a shift in consciousness that goes towards this more relational attitude, or acknowledging the presence and the subjectivity of these others. It could work like that for sure. It has a role, a positive role, I think.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions, Gay and Alice, for your wisdom, for sharing your wisdom. Would anyone else like to ask any questions or share comments before we wrap up? Alrighty, well, in that case,
I think everyone's dazzled.
yes, that is the energy. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight and all of your incredible experiences with us, Alice. We're so grateful to have you here, sharing your time with us.
Thank you all for being here and
Absolutely.
the invitation.
Of course, thank you everybody. And our next speaker in this series will be a week from today, Friday, May 26th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And we will be joined by P. Horsley, the UK's most highly regarded animal communication specialist, whose goal is to deepen our personal and spiritual understanding of the natural world. If you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Krulos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, please consider donating at the link on our website, krulos.org. Once again, everybody, thank you so much for being with us. And Alice, thank you for sharing your time with us. It's been wonderful to talk with you all today.
Thank you so much. And Alice, since you sent and you said the journal, the issue that just came out, we'll share that.
Yes.
It'll be really wonderful as a follow-up for people to read.
Yes, thank you for mentioning. Yes, I would definitely like to share that. So we will do that. Okay.
Is that a question?
P just said thank you. Very interesting.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. We'll have some wine together soon.
Yes, soon. Okay.
Okay, promise.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Lots of love.